Welcome to ASA Central Line, the official podcast series of the American Society of Anesthesiologists, edited by Dr. Adam Stryker.
Welcome back. I'm host and editor of Central Line, Dr. Adam Stryker, and today I'm joined by Dr. Thomas Vetter, the Monitor's new editor-in-chief. Today we're going to learn a little bit about the publication's history, a little bit about its future. I've been looking forward to this conversation, and Dr. Vetter, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming.
Well, thank you so much for having me on, Adam. I've been looking forward to it equally, I'm sure. So thank you very much.
Well, we're going to hear about your new role, but as we typically do on the podcast, we like to have our guests tell a little bit to our listeners about where they're from or what their current role is and a little bit of background about themselves. And so if you don't mind just giving us a little bit of insight into yourself and how you got involved in the current role.
Yeah, I'd love to. Well, I took inventory. I've been a card-carrying member of the ASA for 40 years now. I finished my anesthesiology residency in 1986, so that's a pretty hallmark event. I started my career as a pediatric anesthesiologist in private practice in my hometown of Akron, Ohio. And I did that for about 14 years, thoroughly enjoyed it. But then I pivoted and went back into academic medicine. I got my master's in public health in '07. And then made the transition back into academics. I always tell folks if I had to do all over again when I was at Oberlin College, I would have majored in English and minored in mathematics, the so-called language of science, and spent a semester abroad in Paris. But in my generation at least, it was only the courageous few who would major in a liberal art like the English, which I didn't have that kind of courage. My hobbies and whatnot, I'm passionate about creative nonfiction. And photography. And so I completed my MFA degree in 2022 with a focus in creative nonfiction writing. Favorite vacation spots, I love the south of France. I love really any part of France. I guess been a natural Francophile for quite a long time. And I love visiting the U.S. national parks. They continue to grow in number. I don't know if my bucket list includes visiting every one of them, but I certainly hope to visit as many as I can.
Give us an example of creative nonfiction, something that you share.
Sure. Yeah. So a great place for listeners and that would want to dive into this is an online literary magazine called Brevity. Creative nonfiction, most of us are familiar with it when it comes to narrative journalism, where you're writing a story that's based on fact. You don't make up the facts. That's considered kind of verboten in nonfiction writing, obviously, by its very nature. But the creative aspect of it, I focused on what's so-called flash nonfiction, which is somewhat arbitrarily defined as a maximum of 750 words. And, it would seem like that should be pretty easy to write, just 750 words. But when you try to tell a meaningful story or share a story and do so in as little as 750 words, that is pretty powerful. It's a style of writing that's been around for probably 15 to 20 years. And it's one that I focused on during my MFA. So an example would be to recount an episode, a very specific episode in the operating room, but you only have 750 words to tell the story to your readers and kind of drop them right into the action, so to speak, is what the founders of flash nonfiction would suggest. So every word has to carry its weight.
Interesting. And you still do this, or is this something that you've only done in the past?
My MFA thesis focused to a large extent on flash nonfiction essays that I had written along the course of my MFA, as well as from the thesis course that I took. And I wrote some poetry. I'm probably not that good of a poet, if the truth be known, but it was fun to take some poetry courses. I started off with a course entitled Poetry for Prose Writers. And so the essays of sorts, the pieces that I'm able to write, my freestanding editorials that I feel incredibly honored and privileged to be able to write on a monthly basis for this column that we've now entitled From There to Here. Those pieces are a little more than 750 words. They're somewhere around 1,000 to 1,200 words. And it really brings me a lot of joy. It makes my heart sing when I get a chance to write those freestanding editorials. They're essentially pieces of creative nonfiction, for lack of better words.
That's fascinating. We'll need to have you come back just to talk about the creative nonfiction.
Sure.
But today we do have to get to the Monitor. So I do want to ask a little bit about that. You've been in this role now for a few months, and Give us a little insight into whether this is how you've expected it to go, or have there been any surprises?
I started January 1. I had a great onboarding experience, thanks in large part to Kim Jansen and certainly Steve Schaefer, who's been a longtime colleague. And I'd really consider Steve a friend. He's a great sounding board and thought partner. So our transition was pretty seamless, which was great. But I'd say these first 100 days honestly have been some of the most positive of my life. I feel that I'm in the right place at the right time for this point in my life. Surprises that I hadn't anticipated. The ASA is a very complex ecosystem. That's the only way I can describe it. Healthcare is a complex ecosystem, but the ASA has a lot of stakeholders, and I am a relative outsider to the ASA. Sure, I've been a card-carrying member of the ASA, and proudly so, for 40 years now, but I've not been as actively involved in the ASA leadership as other folks have been, and I have tremendous respect for those efforts. And so I've really had to quickly get up to speed to learn a lot about the various stakeholders, understand their perspectives, their concerns, and their priorities, and to adapt, for lack of better words, which, is one of the things this job really requires is adaptability and flexibility. One thing that I do want to really emphasize is my ever growing or increasing appreciation of our ASA leadership. Having not been, a member of the House of Delegates or I've served on committees, but I don't recall that I've chaired one. I've really started to get to know our ASA leadership on a much more personal level, as well as the incredible team of the staff and the other team members. And I did a 2-day boot camp, as I affectionately call it, that Kim Jansen organized for me in Schaumburg in mid-January. Wouldn't be my first choice to be in Illinois and Chicago in the middle of January. My Yankee blood has gotten thin now that I've lived south of the Mason-Dixon line going on 20 years. But it was an immersive experience. And I'll tell you, maybe you've experienced this, Adam, but every person I met during that 2-day immersion is incredibly passionate about the ASA, as well as all of the members of the ASA as practicing anesthesiologists. And so I continue to learn every day, and I'm not exaggerating, but in some ways, kind of selfishly, I continue to have a whole lot of fun every day. And maybe that honeymoon will eventually sort of come to an end. But for now, the honeymoon is still going strong. So no real complaints, honestly. It's been a great ride.
Wonderful. Well, that's not a surprise. The ASA it's a great organization, but the staff that help make the society run are phenomenal. And so to hear you have such a great experience with those individuals as well as the leadership is not a surprise. And I'm so glad that it's been great so far. Your title is editor-in-chief, and we're all familiar with the title editor-in-chief, but we might not be familiar with your duties. Do you mind explaining your role a little bit and walk us through how a typical work week in your life as editor-in-chief would go?
Sure, yeah. Well, first off, I still maintain a clinical practice 2 days a week focused on perioperative medicine. And to the extent that when I'm in that space, taking care of patients and collaborating with our wonderful team of advanced practice providers, nurse practitioners here in Austin, I have to keep my focus singularly on patient care during those 2 days. But certainly in the morning before clinic starts, then and after clinic, even on Mondays and Tuesdays, I can honestly say every day of the week, including on the weekends, I do something related to the monitor. I think it's the kind of role that you can't compartmentalize. Sure, I have 1 day a week that's officially allocated to my monitor day, which looks good on your Outlook schedule. But the realities are being the editor-in-chief of a publication like the Monitor really requires almost a daily interaction and touch points with various components of it. So I was thinking about this. It's really about networking and communicating as much as possible. Like every day I'm networking or communicating with somebody either I know really well or somebody that I've known in the past who now is coming back and wants to be involved with Monitor as an author predominantly. I really oftentimes view myself as an ambassador for our shared ASA Monitor. And I use that expression intentionally, that it is really our shared monitor and our collective ASA. I'm part of a very phenomenal organization, and I'm very mindful of that. I take a lot of satisfaction out of being a mentor, a sponsor, and an ally for individuals across various walks of life and different points in their trajectory. So I have a lot of conversations, both in emails as well as on the phone, as well as with Zoom or Teams. But I'm also a mentee, and I look for reverse mentoring from younger colleagues and my contemporaries to teach me something, enlighten me. Again, as I said earlier, I continue to learn and have a lot of fun in that regard. And I think ultimately, what does this job require? Well, I strive to be a role model and to share not just the knowledge that I've acquired over the last 40 some years, but also, I dare say, some of the wisdom that I've learned through my own mistakes. Hopefully, I don't repeat them too often. So it's no one day or 1 week in the life of the editor-in-chief is the same. It's not cookie cutter and it's not a recipe. And I think in a lot of ways, that's what makes it so enjoyable. There's just so much variety, including the amazing people that you interact with that are incredibly talented, gifted, and very passionate about what they want to share their story about.
Well, many of our listeners are probably familiar with the Monitor, or certainly loyal readers of the Monitor. They probably share my appreciation for the publication. The publication has evolved over the years. What would you say that the Monitor gets right? And what do you want to maintain or change?
It's a great question. And, it's the stuff of strategy meetings and then looking at metrics and KPIs and all that, which we do because we're really running a business, running any publication, even any scholarly publication, or in our case, medical journalism. It is a business, and we have to be very mindful of that. But I ultimately think we need to provide, or continue to provide, captivating, engaging content that answers two questions I keep coming back to as kind of the litmus test. What the practicing anesthesiologist, wherever that practice may be, either needs to know and or wants to know about. And I have no arrogance, hopefully, or not much at all, hopefully, or hubris in having a good line of sight on this entire broad landscape of anesthesiology. But I love when people bring us ideas, and I want that to keep being the case, that I am an open door and a bit of an open book, and that people can reach out to me or to other members of our editorial board if they have an idea that they want to write about, which they think is going to be captivating and engaging and answer one of those two questions. Is it something your colleague needs to know about or wants to know about? And what I want to do really is maintain the ASA Monitor as what I call the vital voice of anesthesiology, or the voice of anesthesiologist. And so I think that's what we have done very well, and that I would like to see us continue to do very well, is to be the voice of anesthesiology as a specialty, as well as the voice of anesthesiologists who have devoted their lives to this incredibly important specialty that we are part of.
And are there changes that we expect to see coming up? I mean, everybody that has been in charge of the Monitor or has had influence on the Monitor certainly leaves their personal touch on it. And what changes or what strategies going forward do you foresee?
Well, there's I think he was at the Harvard Business School, but certainly the original article was in the Harvard Business Review. Michael Watkins, they wrote a book about it subsequently, and his model is called the STARS model. And it's for a new leader or even just a new individual coming into a company, which is what I consider the Monitor to be. It's a company. It feels like a family-run business, which is kind of cool. It's actually way cool, to be honest. But ultimately, the STARS model, one of the S's stands for sustaining success, which is what I think first and foremost my responsibility is to build upon the efforts of my predecessors. And the other is a gradual but pretty obvious realignment in order to keep, once again, the content fresh. So we've implemented some new columns, 3 of them, the Global Corner, which was the brainchild of Anna Maria Crawford, who, as you know, got the Nicholas Green Humanitarian Award at the 2025 ASA, much deservedly. So we've started the Global Corner, which I'm excited about. Given my passion for the medical humanities, we've started a column called My Medical Muse, and I'm really excited to see some of our really talented, we have many talented colleagues that work in different areas in the humanities and fine arts, are submitting contributions, and those will be published. I've also started a new column entitled On My Mind, which is intended to confront key issues and challenge dogmas in anesthesiology. And then the fourth, which people will notice, is Dan Cole has done, not surprisingly, an amazing job about the brain health column. And in collegial conversations with Dan, we made a mutual decision that we would change the name of that column to Your Patient's Health Matters, so that we can broaden the perspective to look at perioperative population health management across various body systems and various chronic medical conditions. So I think that is some of the tangible things you'll see as a consumer or potential author. We have a really robust set of theme issues in the pipeline for 2026. I have to admit, when I took over, it was a little anxiety provoking because that spreadsheet, Steve had given me a lot of latitude, which I'm grateful for, but it also meant, whoa, I've got to step up and start working on some theme issues. But not surprisingly, it didn't take long, given the incredible depth of our ASA standing committees. We already have theme issues identified and slotted for the balance of this year and are now working into Q1 of 2027. And I think the whole approach to this is to keep it fresh. That's what will keep our readers coming back, and hopefully even some new readers that haven't been reading it maybe as extensively in the past. We have a print copy, which I think is important. I think people really enjoy getting the Monitor in the mail. I know I do. Our reader surveys support that. But we also have a very robust online platform. And as you know, as witnessed by this podcast, the tremendous opportunity continues to exist for digitization of our content, making it more user-friendly and approachable for e-news and social media, podcasts like this, and other technological platforms that we may not yet fully appreciate or understand. I really want to broaden the number of authors so that we don't fall into groupthink. It's very easy. I learned this when I was the Deputy Editor-in-Chief of Anesthesia and Analgesia. You rely on the same peer reviewers because you know they'll deliver the product, and they do it in a timely manner, and they do it really well. But I want to avoid that groupthink kind of inner circle approach. So I'm really expanding to get some new voices, including colleagues on the editorial board who are not in mainstream academics, and get them to write other settings like the military. I have tremendous respect for our active duty military as well as our veterans. And so you'll see more content that represents aspects of active duty military anesthesiologists, as well as individuals who are committed to the care of our veterans. But I'm really pleased by the growing diversification of our contributing authors. And so that's something I'm really committed to. And listeners who may not feel they've been previously represented broadly or even specifically, I welcome their input as regards to content.
You know, the amount of media consumption that takes place in all forms is extreme today.
Yeah.
How do you see the Monitor's role in that array of options? And you can even broaden that out a little bit to subspecialty publications in general, but specifically the Monitor. Not only where does it fit, but how do you see it going forward in its importance?
Well, it's a great question. Another very important strategic question that I can offer my opinion, but that's simply my individual perspective. And I am really taking it all in. I test ideas, with our internal publications team, which have become like my work family, but then also the editorial board members, as well as we talked about the members of the ASA Committee on Communications, particularly Joy Hawkins and Dave Martin is Vice President for Scientific Affairs. Everybody. I meet regularly with Brian Riley and Vince Lafredo, Jim Rathmel, and Yang Jane. But I think the key, I guess if I can answer that, is that, we're a part of a triad of 3 publications that the ASA is responsible for: anesthesiology, anesthesiology open, and then the Monitor. And I think there is a natural interface among those 3. And we're working out opportunities for authors to understand the differences and perhaps the ability for an article or manuscript to be moved from one of those publications to another fairly seamlessly so that it's very author friendly. But I think to your salient question about what's the role of the monitor, I think we're unique because we are a news publication. And I know there is another competing publication in that space, but I think we have incredible depth, both in terms of the ASA membership and, as I said, the standing committees and the ad hoc committees and the work groups, that we, as the monitor, one of its sole purposes is to demonstrate the continued vital role of our specialty to ourselves, but also to those that work alongside us in the OR, in the ICU, in the pain clinic, in the perioperative medicine clinic. I think that's vital. We tend to be the unsung heroes of medicine and healthcare. And I think the Monitor is a very unique platform, a publication writ large, for us to demonstrate that continued vital role. We do that by highlighting the great work we're all doing across all aspects of patient care, education, research, and healthcare leadership. I don't know of any other publication, and I mean this respectfully to my fellow editors-in-chief of anesthesiology, as well as Anesthesiology Open, and the other journals that exist in this domain. And I know all of those EICs, and they're all good people. But the Monitor is really unique in the ability to real time with pretty rapid turnover, a rapid cycle, to put out some interesting high impact stories. So I think as long as we continue to do that, I'd like to believe that we're not going to fade or become obsolete, to be honest. I think we can, if we continue to evolve and stay fresh, we keep our readers engaged and captivated, responsive to the marketplace, working together with our corporate partner, Wolters Kluwer, our current publisher. I don't see this publication fading in any way. I get people come up to me regularly to tell me how much they enjoy reading the Monitor. And I don't think they're just saying that. I think people really do enjoy reading the Monitor, which is ultimately the litmus test, right? That they come back to it. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. So given that importance, what can we as anesthesiologists do to support the work you're doing, the work that the other editor-in-chiefs are doing?
For sure. Our rank and file, the core, the book of business, the bread and butter. I was at the AACD meeting this past weekend. It was held here in Austin, and I gave a lecture on putting peri into perioperative medicine. But, ultimately, our core essence and our core mission is to provide outstanding intraoperative care to patients who are undergoing the most stressful event probably in their lives, having surgery of various types. Well, that said, I never lose sight of that. Having now been a recipient of general anesthesia a couple of times, I'm profoundly grateful for the level of care that I was provided. But what I ask of our consumers is to continue to read our shared ASA Monitor, provide feedback, both positive and negative. Sure, I enjoy hearing positive feedback, but it's equally important, in terms of continuous quality improvement, that we do plan, do, check, act, right? We do a series of PDCA cycles. Well, a lot of that is some quantitative data, but a lot of it is also qualitative data. And that's what I look for, is readers to give me and the rest of our team, or an editorial board member that they know better than me, to give us feedback about what's working and what's not working for them. Again, I've said this a couple times, but I think it's really important. Share ideas for articles or theme issues. We're only allotted so many print pages per month. And so I've proposed that we implement Smart Brevity, which is a great book, #1 business writing bestseller on Amazon, written by the co-founders of Axios and Politico. And the premise is that most folks don't have the time and energy or patience to read, 3,000 or 4,000 word articles, maybe on a Sunday morning over their second cup of coffee or whatever they're in. But, so I think we need to make every word count, a little bit like flash nonfiction does, right? When you asked me about the kind of writing I enjoy writing on the side. But, share ideas for articles or theme issues, and consider writing an article. For busy practicing anesthesiologists, that's a big ask. In my January opening editorial, I asked that question, why should you write something for the Monitor? I think it's vitally important that we have multiple voices, people that previously have not written an article for the Monitor, that they consider writing or co-authoring something, or start out relatively focused with anesthesia, the ASA Monitor today, AMT, that Zach Deutsch does a phenomenal job of, orchestrating his team. Write a microgram as an example, work with our social media team, work with you on a podcast idea. So I really emphasize this is our shared collective ASA Monitor. And so I think that's really what I looked for my fellow anesthesiologists to support the Monitor, to read it and give us feedback. And if you have an idea, start putting some words to paper. We'll work with you and get it fine-tuned. It doesn't have to be perfect out of the starting gate. Nothing ever is. It's always opportunities for some diplomatic editing, for lack of better words. So,
for those of our listeners out there who are intrigued by that suggestion and do want to offer either opinions or volunteer to potentially write an article or a microgram, et cetera, what is the best route for them to pursue that?
Great question. And I think the best way for individuals, the rank and file, which I consider myself to be, the rank and file of the ASA who have an idea, that they use the general ASA email address, which is pretty straightforward. ASA Monitor, one word, at asahq.org. And I know that that's monitored regularly every day, probably almost every hour. Certainly, folks can reach out to me, always receptive to emails. And my email address is t.vetter at asahq.org. The other way to go about this is, again, if you know one of the members of the editorial board, which we are gradually broadening the representation to include individuals from private practice, corporate practice, from the VA. My goal is to bring active duty military onto the editorial board, hopefully in the next year or so. Reach out to one of them. All of their email addresses are on the ASA Monitor website. So I think those are probably great ways to make those initial overtures. If you have an idea, or if you're serving on an ASA committee, it is absolutely mind-boggling in a positive way for me, the breadth and the depth of our ASA standing committees. And so there are ASA staff liaisons for each of those ASA committees. Obviously, there's a chair and a vice chair of each of them. But that's a great way also to bring something organically up through lines of communication. If you're serving on a committee and you have an idea, band together with a couple members of the committee to put an idea forth. We'd love to hear about those ideas.
Excellent. Well, before I let you go, is there anything you want to leave the listeners with regarding the Monitor? Any message or any thoughts?
I think ultimately I want to express my gratitude, my profound gratitude for this opportunity. It is both an honor and a privilege, and it has been a tremendous joy for me to serve in this role. So I think my takeaway or concluding observation is that of my profound gratitude for this opportunity to serve in this capacity. And as I said earlier, how it is a continuous source of learning for me and a source of joy and fun. So I guess it's gratitude, really, ultimately, Adam. It's just tremendous gratitude.
Wonderful. Well, Dr. Vetter, thank you so much for joining us. The Monitor is a great publication. I am excited to observe the future of the Monitor and see how it evolves. And I really appreciate you sharing your insight, a little bit about yourself, and what we can expect going forward.
Awesome. And Adam, you got to promise me one thing. Stop calling me Dr. Vetter and call me Tom.
Okay.
All right, Adam?
You got it. All right. All right, Tom. You got it.
You take care, brother.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
And for our listeners, thanks for tuning in to this episode of Central Line. As usual, if you enjoyed the podcast, please tell some colleagues about it, leave some reviews or leave suggestions. Those of you who want to check out more of the Monitor, please visit the website, asamonitor.org, and tune in again next time. Take care.
Whether you're looking to be a mentor to share what you've learned and help a colleague, or you need guidance and support from a peer who has been there and done that, The ASA Mentoring Program provides an on-demand mentoring relationship so you achieve your personal and professional goals. Explore details and sign up now at asahq.org/mentorship. Subscribe to Central Line today, wherever you get your podcasts, or visit asahq.org/podcasts for more.